Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more videos like this one.
A record of one of the first sequences of the famous Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer (MGM) logo. The logo, known as Leo the Lion, would become one of the most recognizable symbols in the film industry and go through several versions throughout the 20th century, with different lions and recording styles, but maintaining the essence captured in this scene. In 1956, to win a bet, Thomas Fitzpatrick stole a small plane from New Jersey and perfectly landed it on a narrow street in Manhattan, in front of the bar where he had been drinking, despite being drunk. This feat was notable not only for the precision of the landing in an urban environment, but also for the audacity of stealing and piloting the plane under the influence of alcohol. 2 years later, Fitzpatrick repeated the feat under similar circumstances. He performed the second flight because a man did not believe he had made the first landing. A lipstick tester from 1950, hired specifically to evaluate the durability and color of lipstick. At that time, the beauty industry in the United States was growing rapidly, marked by innovation and increased demand for cosmetics. Cosmetic manufacturers such as Revlon and Estee Lauder were committed to developing products that not only attracted customers aesthetically, but also offered quality and effectiveness. An event that occurred on September 3, 1967, known as Dagen H in Sweden, when the country switched traffic direction from driving on the left-hand side to the right-hand side. The main goal of this change was to improve road safety and facilitate integration with neighboring countries that already used right-hand driving. The transition was carried out in an organized manner, despite involving complex changes in signage, intersections, and traffic rules. 2 women in Toronto, 1937, revealing their bare legs in a public place for the first time. In the previous decades, it was common for women to wear clothes that covered most of their bodies, including their legs. Fashion began to change slowly in the 1920s, but public acceptance of more revealing clothing was still limited. 2 members of the Bertram Mills Circus walk face to face on Hammersmith Broadway in London in 1953. The Bertram Mills Circus was one of the most renowned circuses in the United Kingdom, famous for its high-quality performances and attracting large audiences. Founded by Bertram Mills in 1920, the circus was known for its impeccable performances and as a popular attraction in London and other cities. In 1953, the circus continued to be an important form of entertainment, providing shows that included acrobats, clowns, animal trainers, and other circus artists. An ostrich-drawn carriage is stopped by a police officer. The photo was taken around 1930 in Los Angeles. During this period, Los Angeles was rapidly transforming, driven in part by the growing film industry. A guard fainted while other guards remained at attention. The incident occurred in London in 1966. The guards are part of the Queen's Guard, a protection unit responsible for the security of British royal palaces. These guards are known for their strict discipline and ability to remain motionless for long periods in all weather conditions, which can sometimes result in extreme physical situations such as fainting. In the 1800s, Pitbulls were often called nanny dogs due to their protective behavior around children. During this period, families relied on these dogs to care for their little ones, taking advantage of their loyal and vigilant nature. Pitbulls were known for their ability to form strong bonds with family members, especially children, and showed remarkable patience. Besides being effective guardians, they were affectionate companions, providing security and affection. Children carrying signs during the child labor strike in Philadelphia in 1902, a period when the United States faced intense discussions and social movements about working conditions, especially involving minors. At the turn of the 20th century, labor laws were still in their infancy, and child labor was a common practice, economically advantageous for industries. This particular strike was aligned with a broader labor reform movement that would shape American labor legislation in the following years. A prototype spacesuit for NASA's Apollo program, which focused on enabling human exploration of the moon. During the 1960s, before the first lunar landings, significant testing and evaluation of spacesuits occurred, especially in environments simulating extraterrestrial conditions like the Mojave Desert in California. The ship Endurance, a wooden vessel trapped by thick Antarctic ice in 1915. This ship was part of the Imperial Transantarctic Expedition, led by Sir Ernest Shackleton, an explorer born in Ireland. The mission's goals were to cross the Antarctic continent via the South Pole. However, the Endurance became trapped in the ice, preventing the continuation of the journey. Despite extreme challenges, including the eventual loss of the ship and many months in improvised camps on the ice, all members of the expedition survived. 2 women on a street in Afghanistan during the 1970s, a period before Taliban rule. At that time, Afghanistan was undergoing a phase of modernization and greater freedom for women, especially in urban areas like Kabul, where women had access to education and jobs and actively participated in public and social life. After the Taliban came to power in the late 1990s, strict policies were imposed, severely restricting women's rights and freedoms. Princess Diana, a member of the British royal family, broke protocol by running in a mother's race during a sports event at her son Prince William's school. The 1980s photograph highlighted Diana not just as a princess, but also for her personal and warm approach, often diverging from the traditional norms of the royal family. Sergeant R. Gregory and Driver A. Hardman of the British Army at the Erechtheion during a tour of the Acropolis in Athens, Greece in 1944. After the liberation of Greece, Allied troops took moments of leisure to visit historical sites. The presence of British forces in Greece was part of Allied efforts to stabilize the region and support resistance against German occupation. Social status and military function, with armor designed for combat protection and swords, known as katana and wakizashi, serving both for combat and as symbols of honor. A housewife removing frozen clothes from the clothesline in the 1940s. Animals being used as part of medical therapy in 1956. In the photo, Peggy Kennedy, a 3-year-old girl, is watching ducklings paddling in a bathtub. Peggy is a polio patient and is using a plastic chest respirator. In the 1950s, polio was a severe disease affecting many children, causing paralysis and breathing difficulties. The use of animals in medical therapy was an innovative practice to improve patients' emotional well-being. Sarah Rector, a 10-year-old girl in 1913, received a land allotment of 160 acres in Oklahoma through land allocations made to African Americans and Native Americans. But she was assigned arid land considered of low commercial value. Later, oil was discovered on this land, making her one of the first black millionaires in the United States. A self-portrait taken more than 110 years ago by Sergei Prokudin-Gorsky, a Russian photographer pioneering in color photography. He used a specific technique, quite advanced for the time, in which he took 3 black and white photographs using different color filters, red, green, and blue. He later combined these 3 images to produce a single-color photograph. A police officer stopping traffic to allow a cat and its kitten to cross. The year is 1925, a time when urban growth in major cities began to deeply influence the interaction between humans and animals, leading to situations where animal safety often became a concern. A man, apparently drunk, being transported inside a basket by other people in Istanbul during the 1960s. Transporting drunk people in baskets was an occasional practice, especially in areas where public transport was not widely available or was expensive. On July 25, 2000, shortly after taking off from Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, Air France's Concorde 4590 suffered a catastrophic failure that led to a tragic accident, claiming the lives of all on board and 4 people on the ground. Launched in 1976, the Concorde service was known for significantly reducing transatlantic travel time. Despite its technological innovation and luxury, the tragedy in 2000 led to its withdrawal, with the last flight occurring in 2003, marking the end of an era in commercial aviation. This scene occurred in Berlin in 1961, shortly after the construction of the Berlin Wall. The wall was erected to divide West Berlin, controlled by the Western Allies, and East Berlin, controlled by the Soviet Union, during the Cold War. This physical and political division separated families and friends from one side to the other, making direct contact difficult or impossible. West Berlin residents often took their children to the wall so their relatives in East Berlin could see them, even if only from a distance. A German soldier helping a boy cross the Berlin Wall in 1961. The wall divided the city of Berlin into two parts: West Berlin, controlled by the Western Allied forces, and East Berlin, under the command of Communist East Germany. The wall's construction was a direct response to the mass emigration of East Germans to the West and aimed to prevent the flow of escape, stabilizing East Germany's economy and reaffirming the communist regime's control. Otto Frank, father of Anne Frank, standing in the attic where he and his family hid in Amsterdam to escape Nazi persecution of the Jews. During World War II, from 1942 to 1944, his daughter Anne Frank wrote a diary, which later became world famous as The Diary of Anne Frank. The diary provides a perspective on Anne's experiences and thoughts while she and her family lived in confinement, hiding from the external horrors of the Nazi occupation in the Netherlands. Between 1940 and 1944, Corrie ten Boom, with the help of her family, transformed her home in Haarlem into a refuge for Jews persecuted by the Nazis. The house, located above the family shop on Barteljorenstraat, contained a secret room intended to hide fugitives. Although the ten Boom family was not originally involved in resistance activities, the German invasion of the Netherlands in 1940 prompted them to engage in the Dutch resistance. Motivated by their religious convictions, they played a critical role in providing a safe path for approximately 800 Jews. However, in 1944, the collaboration of an informant with the Nazis resulted in the ten Boom family's arrest. After the war, Corrie ten Boom established a rehabilitation clinic for Holocaust survivors. Jewish prisoners newly liberated from a train used for deportation during the Holocaust. These trains were commonly called death trains, as they transported people from various regions of Nazi-occupied Europe to concentration and extermination camps. The liberation of the camps and trains was carried out by Allied forces advancing through Europe to defeat Nazism and end the genocide against Jews. Crew members of the B-29 plane, known as Enola Gay, in a parade in 1945. The B-29 dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. This act marked one of the final, but also one of the most devastating chapters of World War II, as it initiated the nuclear era and played a crucial role in Japan's surrender. Catherine Switzer during the Boston Marathon in 1967, where she became the first woman to officially complete this race. At the time, the rules prohibited women from participating, and Switzer faced attempts to stop her from running during the event. This participation is an important milestone in the history of women's inclusion in sports previously dominated by men, specifically in endurance events like marathons. Bobby Gibb participating in the Boston Marathon in 1966. At the time, the event's rules did not allow women to participate. Gibb, defying these rules, ran without an official competitor number, and upon completing the 26.2-mile course became a symbol of the movement for the inclusion of women in marathons and other sporting competitions. These are Army soldiers being treated in a military hospital during the Spanish flu pandemic, which occurred between 1918 and 1919. This flu was one of its deadliest pandemics in modern history, infecting about a third of the world's population and causing millions of deaths. The virus had a particularly severe impact during World War I, affecting soldiers living in poor and crowded conditions, which facilitated the rapid spread of the virus. Military hospitals, like the one depicted, were vital in trying to contain the disease and treat the infected, who were often young soldiers. A streetcar conductor in Seattle in 1918, barring the entry of passengers without masks during the Spanish flu pandemic. The period was marked by the global spread of this influenza, with a high mortality rate. As part of public health measures to contain the virus spread, many cities in the United States, including Seattle, implemented mandatory mask wearing in public places. The Spanish flu was an influenza pandemic that spread globally between 1918 and 1920, affecting about 1/3 of the world's population and resulting in millions of deaths. The use of face masks was one of the measures adopted in an attempt to control the virus's spread. Gay Pride Parade in New York City in 1974. This event is part of a series of demonstrations that began to occur annually in major cities worldwide after the Stonewall riots in 1969, also in New York. These riots are frequently cited as the beginning of the modern LGBT rights movement in the United States. Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics race held in Berlin. In that edition of the Games, which took place under the Nazi regime in Germany, Owens won 4 gold medals, including in the 200 meters, where he set a new world record. His athletic achievements and performance directly challenged the racist ideology promoted by the event's hosts, who advocated Aryan racial superiority ideals. David Isom, 19, in a swimming pool in Florida on June 8, 1958. At that time, many areas, including pools in the United States, were racially segregated, usually designated for white-only use. David challenged this norm by entering a whites-only pool, which led authorities to close the facility. Events like this played crucial roles in the fight for racial equality, highlighting the resistance against segregationist policies. Charles Cell L. Baker, inventor, and his assistant present a radiator at the beginning of the 20th century. This period was marked by the industrial boom and significant innovations that changed the daily life of domestic and public spaces. Radiators, like the one presented by Baker, were essential for the modernization of heating systems, contributing to greater energy efficiency and thermal comfort inside buildings. Mary Wallace, who was the first female bus driver for the Chicago Transit Authority in 1974. At the time, the struggle for equal rights between men and women was very active in the United States, with the second wave of the feminist movement pushing for greater equality in the workplace and other aspects of society. A Japanese mother and her son sitting among the ruins of Hiroshima. In August 1945, during World War II, American aviators dropped the atomic bomb known as Little Boy on the Japanese city. It was the first time in history that a nuclear weapon was used in conflict, resulting in massive devastation and significant loss of life. Hiroshima, once an important urban and industrial center, was largely destroyed. Charles Ebbets, the photographer behind the photo Lunch Atop a Skyscraper. Ebbitz's unique perspective, showing workers calmly sitting on a suspended steel beam, highlights the notion of challenge and casualness amid risks, typical of the period of major urban constructions. 11 workers sitting on a steel beam while having lunch during the construction of the Rockefeller Center in Manhattan, New York. The photograph, captured in 1932 by Charles C. Ebbets during the skyscraper's construction phase, is often used to represent the strength and determination of American workers. Helen, a telephone operator in Montana, in 1925. At that time, telephone operators manually connected calls in telephone exchanges. In the United States, in rural areas like Montana, operators often played a crucial role in the community by facilitating local and long-distance communications. The proportion of indigenous women in professions like this was relatively small, which highlighted Helen in her role. 4 women mechanics around an automobile in 1927. They are involved in vehicle maintenance and repair activities. At that time, women began to occupy traditionally male spaces, especially during and after World War I. The image highlights the evolution of job opportunities for women and the gradual change in the perception of female abilities. A group of people in swimsuits observing a mushroom cloud during a U.S. nuclear test conducted in 1953, 75 miles from Las Vegas. During this period, a series of tests were conducted to investigate the effects of nuclear weapons, following research initiated by the Manhattan Project during World War II. The explosions were often visible from Las Vegas and other nearby locations, becoming public viewing events. A young man standing holding a sign at a protest which states that he dropped out of school to earn $21 a week, while his teacher's salary is only $17.78 a week. This record belongs to a period of great economic and social upheaval in the United States, marked by the Great Depression, which began in 1929 and extended through the 1930s. During this time, unemployment and poverty affected millions of Americans, and reduced funding for public education resulted in low salaries for teachers. Workers involved in the construction of Mount Rushmore, specifically while sculpting George Washington's face in 1932. Mount Rushmore, located in South Dakota, was conceived as a monument to celebrate the history and great leaders of the United States. The sculpting work began in 1927 and was completed in 1941, involving hundreds of workers who used dynamite and sculpting tools to shape the granite. Two Armenian women holding rifles and prepared for combat. Historically, in 1895, Armenians living within the Ottoman Empire faced severe oppression and massacres. The violence prompted many Armenians, including women, to take up arms for self-defense and occasionally for armed struggle against Ottoman forces. The 3,000 men who contributed to the construction of the Chase Manhattan Bank pose for a photo on August 19, 1964. Located in New York, the Chase Manhattan Bank is an example of the United States economic growth in the 1960s, during which the country experienced significant economic expansion. A German soldier returns from Soviet captivity and reunites with his son, who was only 1 year old when his father was drafted. He was captured during World War II and remained in captivity until the mid-1950s. The Soviet Union was one of the main actors in the war, primarily fighting against Nazi Germany. At the end of the conflict, many German soldiers were kept as prisoners of war, some remaining in captivity for years even after the war ended. Lepa Radić, a 17-year-old girl sentenced to death by hanging. Lepa was a partisan fighter in the former Yugoslavia, participating in the resistance against Nazi occupation forces. On February 8, 1943, she was captured and killed after refusing to reveal information about her comrades. A peaceful act organized by approximately 2 million participants from the Baltic countries, known as the Baltic Way. The participants held hands and formed an unbroken line that stretched approximately 373 miles, linking the three capitals of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. This visually impressive protest occurred on August 23, 1989, and aimed to pressure the Soviet Union to recognize these nations' sovereignty and allow their independence. Niagara Falls partially frozen during the winter of 1883, in which extremely low temperatures were recorded. This photo was taken on April 12, 1912, just days before the Titanic collided with an iceberg during its maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York, USA. This journey marked a pinnacle in naval engineering history at the time, but ended in tragedy, with the loss of over 1,500 lives, becoming one of the deadliest maritime disasters in peacetime. Mount St. Helens at the moment of its eruption more than 40 years ago. This mountain, located in the state of Washington, USA, became notorious for its violent eruption in 1980, which significantly altered the surrounding landscape. The event is one of the most studied episodes in modern volcanology due to its magnitude and devastating effects. The photograph was taken by Richard Lasher, who survived the disaster. One of the first photographs of Niagara Falls, captured in 1840 by British chemist Hugh Lee Pattinson. In the 19th century, photographic techniques were in their early stages of development, and Pattinson's discoveries were part of pioneering efforts to capture natural landscapes. The photograph is displayed inside a glass case at the National Gallery of Art. A line of men waiting for their turn to receive bread during the Great Depression in the United States, which began in 1929 and extended through the 1930s. This economic crisis brought mass unemployment, business failures, and widespread resource shortages. Lines for free or subsidized food, such as bread, became common as many Americans struggled to feed their families. In 1906, San Francisco was severely affected by a major earthquake, followed by devastating fires, which left much of the infrastructure damaged or completely destroyed. An engineer interacting with an IBM computer from 1958. The computing technology of the time, which was in its early stages of development, was characterized by large machines that occupied considerable space. These computers operated with valves and had very limited capabilities compared to modern devices. Unusual photo taken during the 20th century. There is no exact context behind this photo, only questions that unfortunately will not be answered. And you, what do you think was the intention of these two when taking this photo? Write in the comments. Photo from 1970 taken in Istanbul showing a beautiful legs contest. This event demonstrates when society began to adopt Western influences. The contest attracted a large audience and featured women wearing hoods so that the judges would only evaluate the legs without being influenced by other factors. Did you know that the character Shrek was inspired by a real person? This famous character was based on a real person named Maurice Tillet. He was a French wrestler, and in the photo, he poses next to Olga, his wife. Due to a severe illness, the French wrestler, who was very successful in the 1940s, developed a large nose, ears, hands, and feet after adolescence, earning him the title of the ugliest man in the world. In England, he was described as a fierce monstrosity. In the 20th century, a New Year's tradition in some parts of Turkey involved women kneeling in front of their husbands on New Year's Eve to ask for forgiveness for the mistakes made throughout the year. This ritual was seen as a way to renew and strengthen marital bonds, symbolizing a new beginning and the resolution of past conflicts. Around 1921, Washington, D.C. witnessed an increase in car accidents, reflecting the rapid adoption and proliferation of automobiles in the city and across the country. The 1920s was an era of transformation in transportation, with the automobile becoming a popular and accessible means of transport. The streets of Washington, like many other cities, were adapting to this new traffic flow, which often resulted in collisions and accidents. The cars of that time, still in the early stages of development, lacked many modern safety devices such as seatbelts and airbags. Additionally, traffic rules were less strict and less standardized, contributing to the frequency of accidents.